This message is brought to you by Apple Pay. Forget your wallet? It's all good because with Apple Pay, you can pay with a simple tap of your iPhone, the wallet you never forget, at millions of places worldwide, including websites, apps, and anywhere you see the contactless symbol. Security is built in with Face ID, so you don't have to worry about your cards getting lost or stolen. And the best part, you still earn the card rewards, points, and cash back you love. So say goodbye to the billfold, add your card to Apple Wallet, and start paying the Apple way. Terms apply.
I need support staff to clear the room. Stand up and walk, now.
Hello, and welcome to The Watch. My name is Chris Ryan. I am an editor at TheRinger.com, and joining me on the other line, this was not one of his preferred destinations. It's Andy Greenwald.
I don't know what you're talking about. I'm bringing
That's a little Ace Bailey humor, dog.
Come on, I'm bringing that Zomentum. You can't stop me today. We got this.
Zomentum?
Yes.
You're edge combing?
No. Well, so for our listeners who tuned in to hear our thoughts on the Bears season 4, we are somehow trying to triangulate the NBA draft last night.
Yeah.
And the New York Democratic mayoral primary.
First time here?
Just saying. I don't think we pulled it off, but maybe we'll get there.
Greenwald, it's great to see you, man. I'm still in Portland. We're going to talk about the first 3 episodes of the 4th season of The Bear today. Got a couple of news and notes. You look beautiful. What's going on with you? Anything? Update me.
Literally not a thing. I got nothing.
Cool.
I'm just watching YouTube clips of my guy Zoran walking up and down Manhattan, being like,
so you're a day one, right? You're all in.
No, I'm a skeptic, and I'm like, yes, it feels good to feel good about things.
I agree. I agree.
Like, Kaya knows I'm a big supporter of the youth vote.
That's true.
You know?
Yeah. If you ran for face of the ringer, I think you would definitely win the youth vote.
I would win the youth vote, but then
too bad nobody young engages with the ringer.
Also, here comes Governor Ryan coming in with his like scolding centrism.
I lost, man. I lost.
I want to see the machines. I don't know.
Van gave Mal the tiara. I can't do anything about it.
Can you explain? So for people who don't know about this, there was
Van had started a Twitter thread and like a online poll and all this stuff, and he was just entertaining himself where he was like, who is the face of the ringer? The face of the ringer is Bill. But who is the face of the ringer? And he was going through it, and according to Van, it was me. And so he had me on Higher Learning. It was a delightful experience. Unfortunately, Rachel wasn't there. But
that's
when
because
Rachel
she didn't know who you were.
No, I mean, I gotta say, I really, really like Rachel is like an incredible podcaster. And so then she was on when she came back to Higher Learning on Monday's show. They crowned the face of the ringer, and Rachel, with really sound reasoning, was like, I don't really know Chris, so how can Chris be the face of the ringer?
Right.
Now, she also didn't really seem to know Mal, but that's okay.
So she ducked your appearance on the podcast, then was like, I do not know this man.
Yeah.
Also, what would have happened if you hadn't said, Bill is the face of the ringer? Like
Nothing.
what? Like a small electric shock?
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
I don't think anything. Bill actually, if he listens, has a really good sense of humor about himself.
Yeah. No, I think that's. If he listens to what?
Like, for instance, make a joke at his expense. Let's experiment.
If he listens to this podcast, what was the time?
Every once in a while, he does.
It's true. What was the time he listened out of like the last 200 shows? It was a little perverse.
It was about the studio.
All right. Okay.
Yeah.
Listen,
speaking of
I
studios,
love working here. I love the young and the olds.
Yeah. Speaking of studios, Andy, Amazon/MGM have chosen the next director of the James Bond franchise.
I'm really eager to talk to you about this.
And it's a bit of a shocker. It's going to be Denis Villeneuve, one of my favorite filmmakers. The new producers who took over for the Broccoli family are David Heyman, who is a legendary producer and is, for full disclosure, working on the Harry Potter series that Andy is working on.
That's true.
And Amy Pascal, who people obviously know from her production work, but also from the Sony leaks.
And from Catherine O'Hara's loving,
thinly veiled portrayal of her on the studio this last season. And this has been a horse race that is now kind of overshadowed who will play the next Bond, has been who will direct the next Bond. And for a little while there, it sounded like Alfonso Cuarón was very close to signing on. In fact, I think there were some reports that it it'll be done and announced this week, next week, whatever.
There was even some, if I tell me if I'm incorrect about this, but there was some speculation that David Heyman's involvement was
Nailed it on.
because
Yeah.
of Cuarón's involvement, because they have a long history of working together from the third Harry Potter movie through Gravity and et cetera, et cetera.
For sure. So then that kind of went quiet. I think actually even there was some sort of like Alfonso Cuarón has taken himself out of the running here. It looked like there was a bake-off and people were coming in and doing their pitches, doing their takes on the franchise. Some names thrown around included Edward Berger, who did All Quiet on the Western Front and Conclave. Paul
Well, I want to talk about these.
Paul King,
who
the
did
Paddington guy.
Paddington and Wonka.
And Edgar Wright, who obviously did Baby Driver and Shaun of the Dead and Hot Fuzz, et cetera, et cetera. And it would seem like it was kind of all up in the air. And then out of nowhere, like sort of rumor to announcement was very brief, it seems like. Denis Villeneuve, who is currently in pre-production, I think, on the third Dune film, is announced that he is going to be the new director of the Bond franchise for at least the first film. And that gave a very warm and loving biographical statement about how some of his earliest, best memories of cinema are going to the James Bond movies. What did you make of this announcement?
Well, I want to know what you think, first of all, because I agree with you. I think Denis Villeneuve is one of the greatest filmmakers currently working, and he's certainly proven himself to be the greatest curator of large-scale IP that we have. In some ways, like the inheritor to what Nolan was doing with the Batman movies. Tell me what you think first, because you are more of a cinemaniac than I am.
Excited for Bond, disappointed for Denis.
Okay, yeah.
So I think he will make an awesome James Bond movie, but I wish that once he's finished the third Dune film and the next Bond film, the last 5 movies he will have made are all sequels to franchises.
That's including Blade Runner?
Now, you could say, David Lynch did Dune, but this is like very much Denis Villeneuve's take. It's not like he's referencing hardcore like David Lynch's film and it's just an extension of that. So in some ways, these Dune films are quote unquote an original work for him. They're very much in line with a lot of his visual obsessions. Like you can see things in Enemy and you could also see them in Dune. But my favorite period of Villeneuve's career was this extremely prolific and extremely diverse group of films that he did, kind of starting after Incendie, where he makes like Enemy, Prisoners, Sicario, Arrival, and you're like, wow, what the hell? Like we have a kind of goth Spielberg on our hands or something. And so it's a little bit disappointing that he is now kind of the sort of docent for the Museum of Cinema.
I agree with that take. Like I mentioned Nolan before, and I mean this sincerely. I think that Villeneuve has the credibility and affection from audiences and the track record now to be a black swan like Nolan, in that if he makes an original film, audiences will see it.
Yeah.
I wish, we don't have as many directors who are at that level where people will show up for the director. I wish the very few that maybe have that banked could use it more. I think that what this tells me also, look, from the corporate point of view, this is beyond a slam dunk. This is a huge, huge validation of Amazon's money spent of bringing on Heyman and Pascal to shepherd this. It's hard to imagine a better outcome. And I say this as a huge fan of Alfonso Cuarón and his more mainstream films. Yeah. Villeneuve is more in step with the times right now in terms of getting people with a contemporary track record of getting people to the box office. So it's hard. If they got an Oscar-nominated filmmaker to take over this franchise, that again a year and a half ago people were like, why even do Bond anymore? That's wild. That's a huge win.
I do wonder whether or not. Oh, go ahead. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut off the second half of your take.
No,
there.
The second half of the take is it is again smart stewardship, but it is a sign to me that they are leaning into the more contemporary last 20 years version of Bond, which is, like much of our large-scale entertainment, deathly serious. I love Villeneuve. I don't think there are many jokes in his filmography.
No.
it doesn't mean to say that I don't find Dune punishingly heavy. I find it kind of ecstatic in its insane commitment to the bit. Like I really, really enjoy it. It's a lively thing, even though it is enormous in scale. But Bond is also, in addition to being dour, historically has been clever and sexy and slick and fun. And I kind of wish that I just generally want a return to some of that in our entertainment. And I kind of wish that there had been a filmmaker brought on who has shown at least a facility for that type of storytelling. That would have been voted down in the boardroom. I'm not saying that that's a universal take, but that is kind of, I do carry that.
It's such a delicate line that the Bond franchise walks, and there's so many different iterations of it that it's almost strange to talk about it as this monolithic thing. True. I mean, Sam Mendes' version of it is different than Martin Campbell's version of it, is different than any prospective version of it that Denis Villeneuve will come up with. The person who was rumored that I thought might have the balance of tongue-in-cheek humor with action set piece was Edgar Wright. But in terms of like making these movies feel massive and important, they could not have gotten a better director.
I think of the contenders. So if I was going to rank them, I mean, I think it's a no-brainer who they hired. But of the other people you mentioned, who at least are likely to have been interviewed, right? It's Berger, Wright, and King. I think Edward Berger would have done an amazing job.
Very good job. Yeah.
But I think that what I can assume, I think safely, is that it would be more of a Martin Campbell type of thing. Like I think Edward Berger is an incredible filmmaker who has honestly a rare facility for painting beautiful pictures in the service of whatever he's doing. Yeah. I don't know if I would call anything like Bergerian necessarily, other than it's always really well made and really nice to look at. I think Edgar Wright would have been the worst choice here, only because he's very, very, very self-aware, kind of meta at times, and very glib. And I think it would have felt like cosplay Bond, like doing the hits. And I think that one of the things that that I hope the inheritors of the franchise understand is that at least in the public imagination, Bond has a little more gravitas and is like for adults. I know nothing's for adults anymore, not even the Face of the Ringer. But I think that was important to try to maintain. I'm a Paddington guy. Paul King is incredibly British and incredibly visually creative. With a really good script, I think he would have done a pretty interesting job. I think that's the one that I'm most excited about, just to see what he would do in a different, playing in a different sandbox. But I don't know. Did you see the news? I feel like you and I knew this because I don't know if it had been reported before or if he had told us this, but our old pal Tony Gilroy went public with his and Steve Soderbergh's pitch for Bond. Did you see this? We've talked about this.
It was set in the 60s, right?
Yeah, they joined forces and went into MGM at some point in the last decade plus and said, you do it in black and white in the 60s.
It's cool.
Yeah,
I mean, if anything, do you think that, do you want to see the Bond franchise get DCU'd? Where there's like multiple takes on Blofeld going on,
No, I mean, I felt the most, I feel like it doesn't get enough ink that like that the last 10 years of Bond were like, actually it's a unified theory of 007.
Yeah.
And it's all been one
I
story
love Commander
from the
Theory. I love that it's always been like multiple people playing, like, you know what I mean? Like there is like a unified theory of Bond out there that I enjoy reading about, but I don't think it actually holds up.
Just make one sick movie. You know what I mean?
Yes.
And hopefully that is the
They're not going to do that though. They're going to make it like a new Bond. I bet it's going to be a young Bond coming into a 2025 highly digital surveillance state. The new world order is cracking and something else is rising, kind of thing.
Is this something else that's rising? The power of democratic socialism?
James
in the cradle
Bond,
of Wall Street.
James Bond making sure Cuomo gets elected as an independent candidate in the fall.
Do you
would be a fucking bummer.
The only rumor I saw for Bond was Aaron Pierre.
Yeah, I saw that was some wish casting. Yes.
It's wish casting. All right.
Yeah.
Do you have a
guy?
You watch a lot of British television. I don't know if you have
I enjoyed Aaron Taylor Johnson in 28 Years Later immensely. And I think he gave off some Bond fumes in Tenet. Like I think he would be an interesting choice. 15 years ago, I would have said Tom Hardy. Maybe 10 years ago,
Yeah.
12 years ago, I would have said Tom Hardy would be a great choice. I really do wonder, though, if they've made such a brave, breathtaking kind of coup to get Villeneuve, maybe they will think equally outside the box with Bond and think equally outside the box with what kind of story they're going to tell. Because the thing we have to remember is the Broccolis treated this like a Bentley, and it was like, it took years and years of development, and like they built up all this expectation around who was going to be hired to play the role. And it really was like the Olympics, like it was like, here we go. Every 5 years, every 4 years. I know the Olympics are every 4 years, but like they built up to something. Amazon's going to want a quicker turn, and they might want a multiplicity of story, whether it's a Moneypenny series or a Young Bond series,
Sure,
or a Who Was M series.
But I mean, I guess the worry then is, just keeping on Villeneuve, that like Warner Brothers Discovery wanted a World of Dune stories.
They sure
and
did.
We got a show that definitely came out, but that did not feel, that was neither here nor there, because it wasn't strong enough to stand on its own. And Big Denis was like, I'm busy. Basically, I'm making the movies, so they weren't really talking to each other in any credible way. The only thing I'd say about casting is, I think it's important to remember how scandalous, as much as anything about casting can be scandalous, Daniel Craig's casting was. Yeah. There were all these like wailing and rending of garments over a blonde Bond, and also that he wasn't famous. Everybody wanted Clive Owen, or at that moment, like whoever the hot person of the day was. And here's the thing about the UK, and I'm not just saying this because I've spent time there recently. There's so many fucking good actors. There are so many good actors, and I think the inclination to hire someone who has already been an action star is wrong. I think that the Daniel Craig lesson, if there's one to learn, is like, here's a phenomenal actor who's up for it and can become something that we hadn't seen before, and that would be exciting. And I think, again, because the way Villeneuve casts his movies and thinks about making them, I've ended this conversation with you feeling more optimistic than when I began.
Well, I just hope is whoever they pick, I think they should veer younger so that they don't run into the Daniel Craig, like, my body literally can't take this anymore.
I heard
situation.
David Heyman was suggesting John Lithgow.
I can't think of a better way to end. He's
great.
All right, Andy, last episode, we talked extensively about like how we were feeling about the forthcoming season of The Bear. We kind of reset the table about where things were in the third season. And the fourth season arrived. And I suppose we could just say one thing here, which is that this is, I think from our POV, been a bit of an odd rollout. A pretty secretive, not a lot of, I think a fair, some advertising, but I think I've met and bumped into and talked to multiple people in multiple cities who are like, the Bear's back?
Yeah.
So I don't know whether or not there is a little bit of a, hey, it's the fourth season and the show sells itself. I don't know whether there was secrecy around things that happened later in the season. I don't know whether or not this is just the way they prefer to do things with the show, but it went up on servers yesterday, I think at 5 Pacific, which was a little earlier than it initially been stated, maybe. I'm not sure. And when it went up just with episode 1 and a generic description of each episode, which was the sort of description for the season, like the chef's push forward or whatever. So I find it like a little bit strange that there wasn't more fanfare and that there wasn't more ceremony around what I think is like, an award-winning, critically and commercially adored show.
It's very hard to read into it because we know nothing. This was treated like a nuclear enrichment program of level of secrecy.
There's not a ton of secrecy going on around that right now.
Oh, right. Great point. Yeah. Well, so maybe
dudes are sharing.
gotta update my refs. But I don't know whether it's because, as we've mentioned numerous times, like the cast is quite large, quite sprawling, and also quite busy. So they couldn't do a traditional promotional rollout. I don't know whether everyone involved is kind of scarred in some way from the less than enthusiastic response to season 3 / but no, this isn't a comedy awards chatter campaign that happened.
That feels like such a small
it does.
stakes conversation.
There's something that feels, something felt a little bit off about the launch, and maybe I'm trying to not. I mean, I'm not trying to read anything negative into it. There's nothing negative to be read into a successful show coming back. As we've mentioned many times, like on schedule at the same time every year. Maybe on some level, there's just like look. The secret ingredient in this show is love, but also the second secret ingredient is we just put it out there. Like we let the food speak for itself, basically. That the season 1 also dropped with almost no fanfare because absolutely no one was checking for it, and it found its people, it found its tribe,
and it
found success.
It was the only thing I could compare it to for myself was seeing Stranger Things, and that kind of feeling of like, this show went up on a network, I'm going to check it out. It's all there. I mean, obviously with Netflix they do that, but that feeling of like, I think this is a thing, and then midway through being like, this is definitely a thing.
I wonder then, though, if on some level, the challenge that FX may have had in communicating this 4th season isn't that hard to parse, because at least through 3 episodes, I find it hard to explain this season. I find it hard to find a peg to hang a hat on about it. I mean, would you jump into talking about it? So, like, to be clear,
I mean, I think
I've only watched
not to
3.
do more throat clearing, but I regret the way we are covering this show this season. I don't think that you and I are going to be perfectly aligned in terms of how we're feeling about the show, but I wonder if we would be closer if we had just said, we're going to watch these episodes over the next 5-6 days and then do a full season breakdown next week.
I get it.
I wanted to extend the feeling, I wanted to make this more than a binge. I wanted to make it a 3-course meal at least. And I think we'll have some interesting conversations because of that. I watched ahead because I felt compelled to. And also I was really curious about.
Well, guess someone's just swanning around the Pacific Northwest, binge watching television shows. Okay. Anything else? You get any Willamette Valley Pinot Noirs in while you're up there? What else?
No, but I did have a really nice Sancerre the other night.
Here we go. Did Sweeps recommend it?
No.
Did he pair it with?
No, it was at a French bistro. It was really good.
This guy.
Why don't we just get into the show?
I don't know if there's room for you in Zoran's New York, honestly.
I was going to say that this feels like a show that actually deserves like a complete review rather than, hey, we watched 3 episodes, here how we feel.
That said, I kind of reject the idea. I love the show. I love the people involved in the show. I love the spirit of the show. I love having it to talk about and chew over and digest.
But we shouldn't be making
I
like
reject
a bunch of... Yes.
The idea that the way the season begins can be excused by what happens later. I have no doubt that there are going to be some wonderful surprises. I'm sure there'll be some guest stars and some touching feeling experiences and opportunities in filmmaking that is bravura and great. But I was pretty stunned by how the season began.
I want to do my best to be generous, which is to say, the 3rd episode, which is all I've seen, ends with an exceptional scene. At the end of the 3rd episode, Carmy gets on the L, gets off the L. Spoilers for the first 3 episodes of The Bear, obviously.
And runs all the way to Claire's house.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a little funny business in the beginning about Kelly and what's his name, one of the facts. And then there's Molly Gordon, not in a haunting, 90s alt-rock scored flashback, but actually there. And they talk about it. And they talk about it in a way that is pure Bear, like pure uncut Bear. They basically yell at each other, and then they both cry, and then nobody's happy. And I loved it. It was Chaos Menu Relationship Edition, and it moved the show forward, it moved Carmy forward, it moved Claire forward. Honestly, it's also where the 3rd season should have ended. The strangest thing about the beginning of the season to me is that every second counts has become the motto of the show. What's her? Oh God, I forget Sarah Ramos's character, who has now come over
Jessica.
from Ever, repeats it almost as much as everyone else says the word chef.
Mm-hmm.
It's very odd for a show that keeps telling you every second matters to, frankly, waste time as much as The Bear does now in its later iteration. It is so languid. It is so hovering, circling, obsessed with the past, scene after scene of characters talking to each other about things they've already talked about in pairings we've already seen, that it is really disconcerting. I mean, my first takeaway, my first note was like, forget the argument about whether this is a comedy or not. It actually, through the first 2.5 episodes, it's not a drama. A drama, by definition, is, and I'm quoting from the dictionary, an exciting, emotional, or unexpected series of events.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing about this series of events is unexpected. The fact that the bad review leads them to just sort of circling another deeper drain was really surprising to me. Now, I want to get into more specifics, like what's working, what's not working, what we're expecting, what we're not expecting. But I went back and I watched the 3rd episode of every other season just to be sure I wasn't crazy.
Okay.
You know what I mean? And 103 begins with Carmy going to an Al-Anon meeting for the first time. So we're learning something about
That's the Molly Ringwald moderated one. Yeah.
And there's a speech about, structures can change, but nothing is really different until thinking changes, until you've removed the chaos. And like that is a mission statement for the series. The problem is we are seeing it illustrated now in the show. We're like, okay, the structure has changed. It is now a fine dining restaurant. They've removed the chaos. It's just quiet and order, but nobody's fixed because the thinking hasn't changed. And we are sitting in it now for the 2nd straight season.
Mm-hmm. Do you think that when you're talking about the drama part, are you also talking about maybe a lack of adherence to even the broadest strokes of what an episode is supposed to do? Because that, I think, was my central frustration with the first few episodes was like, why is this episode, why does this exist, right? Like, so like maybe, and I don't like doing the like, hey, you should have done it this way stuff, especially with people who we like so much. Honestly, professionally and personally, like I really like the people who are doing this.
Me too.
Like, I think the episodes don't feel necessary, but also feel a little like you're waiting for something really important to happen. And I can't tell if that's because we have brain fever and are like, we need to have like a reveal, a cliffhanger, a twist, a turn, a oh shit moment, or if what you're getting at is like a kind of scene to scene repetitiveness, which I think, yeah, go ahead.
The show needs an editor, or just a reframing. And so that's why I continue to harp on that point that it does feel like 10 episodes got pushed into 20. We don't know that. We've never had that confirmed or denied to us, but it's hard to shake that feeling. I remembered episode 203 one way, and I bet you did too. I remembered Sydney's culinary tour of Chicago. That was one of the show's really first examples of like leaning into non-actors, making it feel real, and just giving the floor to beloved figures.
And to be fair, that episode did actually lean into an idea of like, what if an episode of television could feel like the way something tastes, and also could document a creative exercise.
But I'm going to blow your mind, Chris, because that's not even the spine of 203. That's how we remember it. 203, every character has a plot, like a television show. 203 begins with Carmy and Al-Anon again. So now we're seeing some structure, 103 to 203. He's in these meetings, except now he's participating. Also in 203, Carmy and Sydney are practicing dishes in his apartment. So we get a sense of experimentation and creativity and failure because they make it too salty and they're spitting it out. And they're talking about Marcus's mom and maybe they should send him to Copenhagen. So now we're laying seeds for where the story is going. There are more places for these people to go. Tina's in culinary school in that episode. Richie has maybe not the first, but has a long conversation with his daughter. It's the episode where he goes, Daddy does love Taylor Swift. He just needed a break right now, which is the truest thing this show has ever fucking said. So that's kind of the alchemy that I didn't even notice while it was happening that was missing, which is it was bearing out all over the place. Sydney walking around the loop and tasting things and meeting, people who are famous to the Storer family and to the fine dining aficionados of Chicago. Awesome. And it was exciting. It was like giving us little pops of Bourdain, within a scripted story. But it also was just like meat and potatoes, or I guess I should say beef sandwich level TV making. And this season's episodes, it's not just that everyone is just kind of in a fugue state. It's that like it only snaps into focus every so often. So like the first episode begins with what I mean, I got to say it, like this kind of, I think it's a crutch of expressing interiority when characters watch other movies and shows to explain how they're feeling. So Carmy's watching Groundhog Day and later is like, do you ever feel like you're stuck in something? And I'm like,
yeah, but I think actually that I understand that why you would say that was a little on the nose, or but I do think that the major theme of the season goes on to be, how do you not only sustain a certain level of equality that you're trying to hit every night and answer whatever like nagging voices in your head about being great or being perfect or all these other things, but simply how do you go to the same place every day with the same people and do the same thing and make it feel like anything but a grind? And what are the things that you actually value? Is it performance or is it people?
I think that's very well said, and I see it. It's just that it took, I think it's 8, 9, or 10 minutes into the episode when Oliver Platt's uncle and Brian Koppelman's computer show up with a big clock and was like, okay,
the season is starting.
The season is starting now.
Yeah.
Same thing happened in the second episode. You know, it's like, I think it's in the second episode. There's just like a long hangover from that service, and then Richie goes to sleep, and then the episode starts. You know, again, if you're one of the people who stayed up all night watching it, that kind of ebb and flow, you might just not notice.
So that was the experience that I had, was when I was watching, I found it really easy to click next, even though the first 2 episodes, I agree with you. I was like, this is challenging. This is challenging. I feel like we're still, and I think part of it is even though The Bear is one of our few regularly reappearing series that hits a mark every year, it almost felt like this show is starting the next day, but I've waited a year for this to happen. So there isn't actually, I think it's been a little bit of time since the review came out. Like maybe, no, actually it hasn't, because in the first episode, he's still looking at the paper
it's
that
moments.
he had on the L.
It's moments. And Sydney's still, you know, dodging calls from her father and from Shapiro, my guy from Shappy's Pretzels. What I also bumped on, and I'm not just, this isn't just a recitation of grievances, but what I notice sometimes also is the filmmaking is so good. Michael Mann's blue light shot through everything. You know, the ability of these actors to give so much with so little. And side note on that, when Carmy finally has that conversation in 3, I'm like, oh shit, Jeremy Allen White's a good actor when he talks.
Yeah.
You could hang a lot on his hangdog expression, but let him cook. Let these people
let
act.
Carmy cook.
You know what I mean? There was this moment in 402 where, in an attempt, I think, to sort of gin up momentum or a feeling of something moving forward, something happening, Chris Storer intercuts 3 storylines. You know, and it's cut with some of the familiar freneticism of other seasons. The things that he's intercutting, though, are Sugar being mad about Francie Fack, who I had forgotten about as a thing, and I just assume this is a breadcrumb for some stunt casting later in the season. Sweeps' wine education from who I assume to be a real sommelier in Chicago. Again, and that's one of those moments that you kind of bump on, where it's like, a moment ago they're talking about how they're going to get a Michelin star, and then the next scene, the sommelier is like, what's Pinot Noir? Like, again, I understand these people all have like fantastic journeys to go on, and I love that. But I'm having trouble sorting it all out. And then the third scene is Sid and Carmy talking about the vendors and the terms and apple metaphors.
Yeah, right. That comes after Tina is at the farmer's market.
Yes.
And the pallets are getting smaller and
Each
smaller.
of those scenes on their own is not particularly compelling. The sum of their parts wasn't compelling either. Do you know what I mean? So I think the frustration that you're hearing in my voice was just the fact that every second counts, but we burned hundreds of them to get to what felt like the start. I'm never going to begrudge having this show in my life, because even within the things that I'm complaining about, there are beautiful moments, like Marcus's stunning dessert that he makes, you know, or just these feelings like I am not a machine. Like Richie making magic happen.
You are not computer? Yeah.
I am not computer. Richie making magic happen for people in the dining room.
Yeah, I think 3 really is a significant leap ahead than 1 and 2. And part of it is like I am susceptible to sentimental creation of fake snow for a child or young woman who is recovered from cancer. Like I definitely am open to that. My heart is open to that, as well as the aforementioned Carmy Claire conversation that I thought was just really, really well rendered. I thought that Molly Gordon and Jeremy Allen White were both really great in that scene. It started off with the kind of fax humor, has like that cool moment where she's like, I have to go inside for a second so she can pull her shit together. You know, I think she's open to him, but is like, I am not here to like fix you and be the sounding board for your therapy. Like, do you fuck this up? I liked 3. I think I liked 3 a significant amount.
There were things like,
I do wonder how a restaurant that's running out of money can afford to hire the
6 more
staff
people
of ever.
Yes.
Yeah, right.
I totally. But there are, I think a lot of this comes down to not just the engine of the car you're driving, but what kind of car you're driving. Like Forks, a masterpiece, turns Richie from an absolutely unfixable dirtbag into a dude who wears suits and is can run a restaurant worthy of a Michelin star.
Mm-hmm.
It does it with such humor, such heart, such efficiency that your heart soars because we want to believe in fantasy. Like I don't want this show to be realistic. Like every season,
he also becomes the man he wants his daughter to see him as.
Yeah, and every season, like certain magazines and newspapers and websites, like okay, round up real chefs to talk shit about this show. Like I do not care. The verisimilitude is not what appeals to me about the show. I think that what is accurate to human experience in a way that I think is not unique but special with The Bear is I think it is one of the most kind-hearted and generous shows about the fallibility of human beings in the way we are to each other. Mm-hmm. I think that scene that I'm harping on with 3 because I found it really wonderful. Yeah, the acting is just, they're both so good and they're so natural and they're so attuned to each other. But the line that I love about it is when, because I think to some degree, right, Carmy is thinking this is like a big say anything moment. Like he's going to do a big dramatic gesture.
I'm going to knock on the door and then this is going to be fixed because I made the first step
of his heart and he's going to be forgiven. And his stumbling when he realizes what has he gotten himself into, he can't plan a structure for this. This doesn't work on the brigade system. He can't say, do it faster, chef. This is another person with her own autonomy in the scene. That's wonderfully illustrated and wonderfully played. And then he does for him, he emotes and he's like, it's just so loud, And then what Claire says that I loved is it's loud for everyone. And it's just this acknowledgement that everyone is carrying a screaming Italian beef sandwich shop in their head at all times,
I kind of wonder whether or not that's something to keep in mind going forward. This is actually not something that is indicated in future episodes, but whether or not the sort of idea behind this season to some extent is undoing the main character syndrome of Carmen. Or like whether the idea is essentially like the first season, especially everybody is orbiting Carm and is like, he's so crazy, but he's so talented. And we definitely need to keep this place alive. And then the second season is turning it into a fine dining establishment and whether or not it will be approved of, but it's still about Carmy's brilliance and whether Carmy can take his traumatic experiences from some of the greatest restaurants in the world and turn it into like a homegrown rock star restaurant. And then you get to the end of that season and that review is kind of like, it's okay. There's some issues, but it's also got some dalliances with brilliance. And maybe this season is less about whether or not he can do both, whether he can make a family-run brilliant restaurant, and more about whether or not he sees the other people around him as main characters too.
Yeah, and I think you can see it. Like, everyone who made the first 2 seasons of The Bear are some of the best television of the decade. Everyone who made those seasons is still working on The Bear. Like, they didn't forget how to do it. I think whether they bit off more than they could chew, or again, they tried to spread things too thin, or certain a love of fine ingredients, expensive ingredients like extra time or extra location days or guest stars. Maybe people fell in love with that. We don't really know, but we'll unpack it as we go across the season. But people know how to do those things. So they still know how to do the things that were so good in the first 2 seasons. So I'm noticing, of course, when in 1 and 2, Carmy is noticing Sid and noticing how inessential he may be now in her ascension. And he says this dish is perfect, and he sees how fast she's doing things, and he steps back. Or he notices the lengths that his floor crew will go to help people. That's there. But man, editing is such a powerful tool. It's such a powerful tool.
Is the reverse of that, and I'm asking, I'm not saying it, I'm wondering if the reverse of that is Forks, where a character goes through a complete and total transformation in the course of like 20 minutes. And you're like, now Richie is the greatest maitre d' of all time and the greatest front of house person of all time because he had like a month of good nights at ever.
Yeah.
Versus the actual time spent of watching Carm watch other people.
Yeah.
And maybe start to see. Yeah. But that might not be entertaining television.
Here's the thing. Everyone involved in the show is so smart that sometimes the things that I'm pointing out, they're like, yeah, that's the point.
That's the point.
One of the things that is, yeah, that's the point, is that the Bear, the restaurant, is soulless and kind of dead and creepy on the inside, right? Compared to the sometimes joyous, sometimes profane chaos of Mikey's
the place
beef.
that Tina walks into in the 3rd season.
Yeah,
or the place that flashback episode.
The place that Sid is working in the 1st season. We see that. We all understand that one of the clever, compelling things about the show is that the restaurant space is Carmy's brain made manifest, where he's like, I will clean this up. Just like I've tried to fix myself, I will fix this up through rigor and structure and repetition, and then I'll be fine. The problem is we've all now caught up to this, that he's not fine and this isn't fine. And we caught up to it around episode 8 of season 3. And now he is still just sort of sitting there, staring, stewing, thinking about it, noticing, should I smoke a cigarette? Maybe not. Oh, Sydney's good at this. I'm going to touch the door of the fridge because I remember that's where I broke up with, you know what I mean? It's like even his run with the Love and Rockets song playing is super long. You know what I mean? Like there's a lot of physical movement going on to get him to that place. I just think he's stuck. It's been beautifully rendered. And at least for the last 3 episodes of the last season, 3 episodes of this season, we're stuck too. Doesn't mean we can get unstuck.
Yeah.
I think that if the show waved the checkered flag on some of these storylines, things would move real fast.
Yeah.
But it's
pitched it to the earlier seasons are pitched at such a great intensity that it's hard to imagine this being a workplace dramedy in a traditional sense of like, we're just going to, and honestly, these people are so articulate. The characters are so articulate about their emotional states that it is not actually, hey, did you watch the Bulls last night? Like, I don't know what they're doing. You know what I mean? Like, did you go see Sinners? Like, nobody is talking like a normal person. They're all talking about their feelings all day long at work and what work means to their feelings and how the two shape one another. So there is a degree of this is appointment television, like this is the most important parts of these people's lives, but you are making the show in such a way where it's like, that's every single day for these people. So how do you make it a sustainable and entertaining show going forward?
I think that's very well said. What if, I guess the thing I would say, I want to go back to your point about main character syndrome.
Sure.
And you've watched ahead. So I hope this isn't, I don't want to overly tax your brain in terms of spoilers, but one does get the sense, both on a story level and honestly as an audience member, that Carmy's got to go. That maybe he's the cork stopping up this whole thing right now. Because if he and his psychology were removed from this restaurant at this point, it's a completely different thing about, once again, scrappy people trying to make it on their own, not an insanely walled off perfectionist floating above everyone, demanding that they transcend earth and time to get to his level.
Can I ask a question to your question?
Yeah.
Would you feel that way if Jeremy Allen White wasn't becoming a pretty big movie star?
Like, is part of my question because I want to give him the freedom to do Born to Run 2, Electric Boogaloo?
Yeah.
No, I mean, he's so, part of it is the frustration of he's acting, the character's in a straitjacket, and through 3 episodes, he's acting in a straitjacket. Until that scene, he doesn't do anything. Like, he's not yelling at, he and Richie aren't even yelling at each other anymore.
No, I mean, I actually really like the Richie and him scene. I believe that's in 2?
At the beginning of 2, when Richie's locking up.
And he's like, I'm going to lock the door. Is that going to interrupt your moping? And then he's like, is this performative? And Carm he just gets to the edge of being able to start talking about it. Yeah. I mean, I think a lot of this season is about the things that we can't tell each other. You're right. Normal restaurants, by the way, do this, where it's like, it's the vision of a central chef who then gets it to a level of success and turns it over to the staff and goes on to become the creative figurehead of multiple restaurants. I mean, that's what Chang did. You know, like, that's what lots of people have done. Maybe that's where this is going. I don't know, because I have not finished the season, and that has not come up in my viewing yet.
I think that the other moment that stood out to me is that there is a very lovely Tina and Carmy scene. I think it's in 2.
About
and what it is, it doesn't matter. I think it's in 2. And she's like, I didn't sleep last night because I had a fight, and this is what happened in the fight, and this is what happened in the morning, and now I'm here. And I'm like, show us the fight. Yeah. Like, take us into the active lives of the characters. There is a thing that you can get away with to a degree that then suddenly has diminishing returns, and it's the talking about the thing that was interesting, not showing it, and telling, not showing. And I mean, even the season begins that way. And it's to be forgiven because, like, again, anytime Bernthal and Jeremy Allen White are together, I'm like, is Heat 2 going yet? Like, what are we doing? Like, these are right. These but guys are awesome. But do you remember the tenor of that conversation was circling the same drain yet again, except this time it's like, remember that one place we used to go to all the time? And he's like, yeah, I remember that one place we used to go to. Show me the place. Or don't, like, telling me about shared memories to make me feel something, to me as a viewer, is the same as having a character watch a movie about how he's feeling. It's like so many different layers of remove when, and I think that I'm bumping on it particularly in the case of this show because the glory of the Bear at its best.
Because Sydney doesn't come in and say, hey, I once had a day where I went all around Chicago and had all these different foods.
Exactly.
And that's what eventually inspires this scallop.
The glory of the show is the immediacy.
Adventure. I get that.
When Carmen says, it's noisy up here, we have seen how noisy it was at the original beef restaurant. We have seen how noisy it was in the best kitchens in the world. Well, not the best kitchens. That's not noisy. But we've seen how noisy it is at his kitchen, at his dining room table in Fishes.
Yep.
Right? So we know the noise, and we bring that to bear when the character is confessing something. And that's the beauty of serialized long-form television storytelling, right? So it's interesting. Like, I think that, hopefully when we get to talk to Chris Storer again, I mean, he's a filmmaker first. And I think that he likes experimenting. And there's nothing wrong with that.
I think it took me a little while, but I feel like, at least from my, like, visceral reaction, that a lot of this season is shot at a much more close-up angle. Like, it's focused way more on faces than body movement or the idea of people gliding around each other. There's actually a scene, not even talking about what it's about, but one of the scenes that jumped out at me and think later in the season is when Carmy is talking to one person in the kitchen and then turns and the camera just pans to the next conversation Carmy has in the kitchen. It's not acrobatic. It's not in some sort of chaotic flashbang way. But I was like, oh, all 3 of these people are in the same space and they're having 2 conversations at once. And it's not like a fax thing where, like, all the fax stuff always happens like kind of in an alley, or Richie and Jessica are usually in this office, or Natalie is often on the phone. And there's like a degree of, like, not recycling it, but just like, this is how I'm shooting these people. And this is where they're I'm really focused on their faces and their faces exhibiting this emotion. I like people moving in space. You know, like you're kind of saying, like, I like to see it rather than just be told about it.
Yeah.
I like to watch people dance around one another on a stage as much as I like to see the contours and the scars and the eyebrow twitches of characters. We're also, you know, we are talking about TV that's being executed in a very high level. Technically, the music remains some of the best music ever made.
Finest works
they
on
use a
needle
lot
drop,
of it. Yeah,
me.
you know, I mean, there are so many great needle drops. I'm excited though. I mean, after I think that this conversation is going to evolve. I don't think we're just going to be repeating the same points as we talk about this. I'm so excited
to hear that. I think the magic of most of the things that I care about, whether it's filmmaking, art, food, is a collision between chaos.
Democratic socialism.
That's actually a very good point. Organizing versus governance is a collision between order and chaos.
Uh-huh.
And I think this show needs more chaos. I think the chaos has to come back, not in the form of like agonizing over Carmy's menu, but in terms of the messiness of actually being alive outside of the circumstances you can control.
Yeah.
Outside of that ticking clock that is also just an artificial, structure that they're now existing in. And the end of 3 reminded me what the show can do when it gets there. So I'm very eager to keep going, and not just because like, you know, I can see the run times exploding around episode 7. So that's clearly
so that's what I think we should probably do. Is the next batch we should do includes 7.
Okay, so 7, for Monday,
4, 5, 6, 7.
4, 5, 6, 7. So you're asking me to watch 4 episodes of television.
I'm not asking you to watch Gilded Age.
I want you to tell me about Gilded. We didn't even do that today. Maybe we'll do that on Monday. I texted Chris this morning and I said, Chris, Wolf of Wall Street penny stocks me about Gilded Age. Call me.
Can I interest you in Cynthia Nixon joining the temperance movement?
This is what I'm saying. I need to be moved on this. You know, I am gettable. I am a mark.
Yeah.
So I need you to do that. You need to be your best sharp and make the sale. Maybe you'll do that Monday.
You know what Gilded Age does well, that I almost wonder whether or not we could like cross-pollinate and get a little of this in the Bear, is they make the littlest things seem like the Wizard of Oz is happening. You know, like where they're like, this guy is working on an invention of a new kind of clock, and like 18 people are getting involved in this process. Or, you know, the last season was largely about who got what box at what new opera theater.
Oh.
So, you know.
Okay. What was that thing you were saying before about how at work, like you work with people every day, but there are things you can't say to them? Should we make this podcast are there things that you find, is there something you want to get off your chest that you could only say maybe to Van? Like
No, not at all.
Okay.
Yeah. Should we wrap up there? How are you feeling? Do you feel like you want to end on a different note?
Well, I mean, I don't know. Do you want to talk politics? You want to talk nuclear regimes? Where's your head going?
No,
VJ Edge going?
Like, you know, you have this very full menu of Bear stuff, but is there anything else you're excited to watch coming up?
I want to see F1.
Yeah.
Have you seen it? You haven't seen it.
No, I have not seen it. I'm going to try and see it in IMAX, so I got to get back to Los Angeles for that.
They don't have IMAX up there?
I think they do, but it's not close by.
They do, but they're only showing like John Tillman, you know, or whatever.
They're only showing Brandon Roy highlights.
they're only showing like the Sight and Sound 10 best films.
I wish. Man, it's good to see you. We'll be back on Monday, not in person, but then the following Thursday, right before July 4th, we'll be back in person to discuss the end of the season of The Bear.
How many Michelin stars are we going to give it? Oh, I know what we didn't do. Oh, no, that's for next week. Sorry. I forgot which day it was. We have our barbecue playlist.
Oh, we have our barbecue playlist.
We can debut that next week.
Okay.
After you sell me on the Gilded Age. I mean, talk about getting people psyched for our next episode.
Thanks to Kaya. Thanks to John. We'll talk to you guys on Monday.